Hello, and welcome to Girls, Gays, Animes, where it is safe to love what you love and love who you love. I'm your host, Valsaraptor, and I'm here with my co-host, T, and we both love spooky season, which is why we're here today to talk about the Uzumaki episode 1 that recently came out this past weekend. I like to call it Halloweeb, actually. So it's Halloween, but it's for the weebs.
The only way to do it.
Yeah.
It's the right way to do it.
So I was actually really excited to watch this episode. I was sitting patiently waiting for it to release because I was honestly really excited for both to just watch it in general, but then also because I'm waiting for the English to come out as well, because I'm really excited for the English voice acting cast as well.
Yeah, I'm interested. I watched the first episode subbed, obviously, and I would love to hear the English take on this, just because as we will discuss, it gets wild up in here, so I would love to hear how a native English speaker will take a spin on that. I think that's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to lose something because, like, Uzumaki in Japanese is spiral. So whenever they're talking in Japanese and you're watching in sub and you keep hearing Uzumaki, 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 and it adds something to it, whereas when you're going to be listening to it in English, or even when you read it, it's like spiral, and it doesn't have the same carry that hearing Uzumaki, the name of the anime or the manga, like does, like when you're watching it, I think.
Yeah. That makes me wonder if they're going to keep, because it is called Uzumaki, you know, that's the name of the anime. I wonder if they're going to say that instead of spiral in the English, because that'll be really weird if they do.
I don't think they will. I think they'll say spiral, and I think it'll, like, lose some of its, like, depth.
It loses a little bit of the punch.
It does. It really does. So, that's kind of my first thing. So, for me, I've read Uzumaki already. I have the omnibus, like, the full hardcover one at home, very bougie. Did you read the manga in advance of watching this, or was this your first exposure to Uzumaki?
This was my first exposure. I had, like, I had the general concept, it's about spirals, and it's Junji Ito, so it's gonna be spooky ooky. And I went into it blind, and that, I'm very glad that I did, because I'm gonna go back and read the manga when I watch the whole thing, because I don't want to be spoiled for anything, because there's a scene you and I were talking about separately that I did not know was gonna happen. And I was, like, pulling the covers up, like, oh, golly, I don't enjoy that at all.
Yeah, so I don't even know where to start with talking about it. Like, I'm actually really excited to hear that you haven't read the manga, because, like, me going in, I feel like whenever we talk about mangas that go into animes, they lose, like, depth. And this Uzumaki series, if I'm not mistaken, it's only going to be 4 episodes.
It is. I looked it up.
And so Uzumaki in its like manga form is a bunch of short stories that kind of like add up to like the one big story. And I mean, the omnibus is like this thick, right? I don't know. I'm trying to, for people who are just listening, how thick is that? I don't have a banana for scale. But it's a longer read. So to kind of be condensed into 4 episodes, I'm kind of bummed about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it's a pretty straightforward plot, right? Like, you're in this town, and the town is being, like, haunted, for lack of a better word, by spirals. Right? Like, that's kind of like the base. Yeah. But then you've got this kid, and there's only, like, one person in the whole town who's, like, conscious that this is happening, and he's trying to save his friend. Meanwhile, everyone around him is just going, like, cuckoo for spirals.
Yeah. I did see that was I was skimming other people's reviews just to, like, see what people's thoughts and feelings were, because as someone who hasn't read it, I was curious. And I did see that was the biggest complaint, that, like you said, it's an omnibus and it has so many pieces to it. They're not going to be able to cover every story with just 4 episodes. So when I go back and read the manga, I'm going to be interested to see what they eliminated for sake of the 4-episode format.
Yeah.
And judge them accordingly, because if they leave out something that I'm going to think is really cool later, I'm going to be upset about it.
So my initial impression on the first episode versus the manga so far is that, one, it was phenomenally done. Like,
it's beautiful.
The side-by-sides of the manga versus the anime they're paralleled, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just slightly more crisp in the anime, but otherwise, like, it is spot on. From a storytelling perspective, the only thing that I've noticed, and I know that you said like there was a scene where you're like kind of hiding under your blanket, the anime is less creepy than the manga. That is the one thing that I will note so far that I've felt personally like reading versus watching it.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, as someone who just reads manga in general, it looked like they took the manga and animated it straight out. Like, it just, from page to screen, and it was just starting to move on its own, it's very beautifully animated. I was very impressed. As someone who is very into horror and watches, like, all kinds of horror, not just, like, anime and things like that, like, I have a very broad spectrum of horror. It takes a lot to unnerve me. Mm-hmm. So when I saw the one scene, I was hiding under the covers. I was like, oh, good, I'm going to like this. Because there were a couple times, like you said, it wasn't as jarring for you. There were a couple times where I was like legitimately laughing. And I was like, is this because I'm just, I'm jaded and I just have so much like backlog that this is funny to me? Or is this actually supposed to be funny? Am I missing something?
No, okay, so we should have put a spoiler warning. So spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't seen the first episode, but at the same time, it's like, there's a premise, and then everything that you're kind of getting spoiled for is just, like, maybe some of the creepy stuff, but I promise when you see it, it's still gonna be creepy for you. Like, even if you know it's coming, it's still gonna be creepy. So, like, when you talk about the scene that, like, really creeped you out, basically there's a scene where a woman, she cuts off her fingertips. Ugh. It becomes conscious of the Uzumaki, of the swirls, and she's trying to rid her body of the swirls. She's becoming, like, paranoid. She, like, shaves her head because there's a chance that her hair could become a swirl. She, like, does all this other stuff, but, like, the one that we see in the anime is her cutting off her fingertips because she, like, realizes that her tips are, like, swirl-shaped. And so it's, like, that kind of thing. Like, even if you know it's happening, you don't, like, when you see it enacted, you're like, that's creepy.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if they were gonna go like full gambit and actually show it, because at first it looked like she was just gonna hold up her fingers and they were gonna do kind of like a cutaway, and I was like, okay, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna commit? And my husband was sitting in bed with me, and he's not a horror person, so he was just, playing games on his phone. And I, like, as soon as I saw her cutting off her fingertips, I screamed and went, no. And he looked over and he's like, what's happening? I'm like, don't look at the screen because you will probably pass out. Don't look.
Yeah, no, I got like a little woozy. And mind you, again, I've read it and I'm watching it. I know what's happening and I'm still like, gross. But like, I can't stop watching. But to your point earlier about like, you're like watching it and then some points it's like so creepy, but then you're also laughing. I feel like that's like core Junji Ito. So have you like experienced any other like Junji Ito works?
I don't think I have.
I'm wearing my Tomie shirt.
I love it. I know of his works, obviously. Like, I've seen things, but I haven't like sat down to enjoy them in full.
Right. Okay. So basically, like, oh no, my camera died. So basically, Junji Ito, he's a core, like, he's a horror manga artist, right?
Yeah.
But his style, like, the art itself is incredibly creepy. However, like, there is that sort of, like, playful nature to it. Like, to your point about, like, oh, it's creepy, but I'm laughing. That's honestly, like, par for Junji. Like, it's, like, part of what makes his style unique.
I love that. And I also know that he likes cats.
Okay, so yeah, not to totally derail the conversation, but yeah, he has a whole manga on, like, his cats that he owns and, like...
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
So, my gosh. So I have the hardback version of that one as well. And it's honestly, I don't know if I've told you about the cat manga, but basically it's like everything comical and like annoying but precious about being a cat owner.
Yeah.
But it's like told in a horror style.
But
like to the point where it's like, you know how like a cat like will favor one person over other people, but like he's going over that, but like from a like a horror mindset. But then like so you're like laughing because you're like, oh man, this is such a cat thing, but then it's simultaneously creepy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So that's just Junji. That's his whole bit. I'm gonna spend the whole month just like rereading and talking about Junji Ito, I think, for Halloween.
Yeah, I think that's my goal for this month. I was checking earlier on Hoopla, and my local library system is letting me down for once. They don't have, from what I could tell, any of his works on there. Excuse me. So I am going to have to go out and obtain those myself. But as someone who's very into horror, I don't mind buying those. So my thing this year, and I've been trying to be very strict about it, is instead of just going out and buying something just to read it once, I've been trying to see if I can rent it in some aspect, like through the library, or like, you know, just not have to pay for it initially. And if I like it enough, I'll go back and buy it. And when I go back and buy it, I'm trying to buy from like a local bookstore instead of Amazon or something like that if I can. So I'm going to try to see if my local favorite bookstore can obtain it for me.
So when you're exposed to Uzumaki and it being your first Junji Ito experience, the fact that you caught on quickly to the fact that there are parts that are funny, but then there are also parts that creep you out, but they work together. Yeah. And like you feel a little sick sometimes when you're like, should I be laughing at this? But that's it. Like that's part of his style. It's part of Junji Ito's style is to like make you feel sick, but then it also be like very entertaining to watch or engage with. What specifically about the episode? Like what was your favorite scene in the episode?
I don't want to say it's just a scene, but I really liked the development of the one girl who has like the spiral in her face. I really liked her story and how she just seemed so normal and she was trying to be friends with the female main character. Is it Kira? Trying to be friends with Kira or Kiri? Kiri. I'm going to go with Kiri. She's just trying to be friends with her and she's really pretty and popular and everything. And then we slowly see like the bits and pieces of her kind of falling apart and her spiral kind of taking over. And I feel like Kiri was kind of taking her boyfriend seriously to an extent, especially with everything happening with his dad. Like he's not making up stuff about his dad. And then when she sees his dad kind of acting weird, she's like, okay, maybe he is telling the truth. But then once she's experiencing her own problem firsthand, I feel like that really hit home for her and kind of woke her up to the situation. So I really liked seeing the spiral devolve into that one girl. That was really interesting.
So I have two comments. One, if you liked her development in the anime, you're going to love her development in the manga because they go into like slightly more detail and it's more about like her whole bit. Because she has a bit, right, where she's like, basically, like, I can make any guy fall for me sort of thing, right? So she goes into that bit a bit more. It's really giving Tomie vibes. So if you're into that vibe, you'll love Tomie. But the other thing that I wanted to comment on relative to that is like how you said like she's like trying to take it seriously because her boyfriend's like freaking out and stuff. But like she's also like playing it loose and fast because it's not affecting her. I was on the Reddit pages trolling through trying to figure out like what the vibe was, like how other people were feeling about it. And everyone was just like, oh my god, the female main character, she's so cute because this guy's like talking about how his dad is like spiraling and he's like talking about how his eyes are like spinning and she starts to do like this thing and everyone on the Reddit page was just like, oh my god, she was so cute the way she did that. And I was just like, is this really what is this what we're really getting from this? But it was like one of those things where it's like, okay, she was like in a silly, goofy mood, and it's in this like super serious, like creepy horror manga, but like it was a funny moment where it's like, okay, it was still lighthearted, even though like people are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of we haven't seen it firsthand. We're hearing it from him. We're hearing that his dad is going crazy and doing these strange things, and it's being animated for us, but we haven't experienced it live yet. So we're kind of with her in a sense that she's like trying to test her eyeballs out and see if she can do that too. You know, like I would do that. I'm like, oh, your dad's eyes do what now? Like trying to get my eyes to do that in like a silly, goofy way. But then once, being a silly goose, silly gander. But then once it starts happening to her, she's like, oh my gosh, like this stuff was happening. I should have taken him more seriously. And I'm really interested to see what it comes of that, because he's like, hey, do you want to run away with me? Do you just want to leave this town? And she's like, why on earth would I want to do that? Like, why are we going to run away? But now that it's happening to her, like, I want those poor kids to get out of that town. Like, oh my God.
That's one thing that's a common theme, I think, with Junji's work, is that you're watching it unfold and you're like, why are these characters so dense? Like, what about them is making them so dense to the situation that they're in? Where it's like, just leave, just stop doing that. Oh, if they'd have just left. But now you learn more later about like what the town, like the whole town is like, you know, the spiral, and it pulls you in. She's like, why on earth would I do that? She very well could in that moment be controlled by the spiral, like minutely enough, but it's enough that the town is the spiral, the town is pulling her in. She can't fathom leaving because she's like, well, why would I think it's even like deep rooted in her subconscious, because this curse on this town is it's got such a strong grip on them. But
yeah, that was the kind of vibe that I was getting from it. And the fact that he goes to school out of town, he's able to kind of break away from it long enough to see the cracks in the town and in the spiral and everything. So like you said, he's trying to talk to someone who's still stuck in this mentality, and he can see the light. He sees what's wrong, and she's just over there trying to spin her eyeballs like a chameleon.
Spinning like a ballerina. So there's that piece of it. The other thing that I wanted to say too is that, like, on the same note about like you miss a lot of the lore with the like spiral eye chick, you also, I hope there's still a chance that they're going to go into more detail about the mom, because honestly the mom was like one of the freakiest parts for me. Like I know we already talked about like her cutting her fingertips off and stuff, but like there's more. Like she gets like more, I don't want to say grotesque, but like the extent to which she's paranoid about spirals existing on her body becomes more intense. And so like if you know the human body, you know like all of the spirals that exist or can exist in the human body. Like at the point that she cuts her fingers off, like if you think about anything could like either spin on the human body, or like there are certain body parts like that are naturally like spiraled. So not to give too much away, but like think about your eardrums.
Yeah, I was like going through my mind. I was like, all right, what about my body is like, you know, could make a spiral, and it's getting worse the more I think about it.
Right. And so like in the manga, they talk about how when she got to the point where she was cutting her fingertips off, there used to be like, you know, like when you go into a doctor's office and there's like, you know, posters around and you're like, the skeletal system and like, oh, this and that. They like talk about how the doctors had to go in and pull those off the walls because they were giving the mom new ideas about different ways for her to be paranoid about the spirals in her body.
Oh.
And so that's what I mean. Like, this is creepy, but like the manga really lays into the creepiness. Like, I loved this. Like, I think this is great because I think it's going to get more people to read Junji Ito's work. But if you want just that extra little oomph of creep, it's there. It's in the manga. Like, it's not like going to take you over the top where it's like, oh, / gore. Cause like you already saw, they're willing to show the fingertips like being cut off and not the cutaway scenes. But it's just that extra bit of lore, that extra bit of creep on top that the manga's willing to do takes it over the top for me.
I like that. I like the little, you know, it's just enough. It's just enough.
It's a taste. Extra. It's just a little appetizer, little appy teaser to the full story.
To horror.
To horror. I was gonna say too, we were talking about the voice actors earlier, and one of the, I don't know if it was the English voice actor, I think it's the English voice actor for Megumi Fushiguro from JJK, I think is the main male character in the English adaptation. So that is something that I look forward to. The girl is voiced by the same voice actor as Nezuko, but we don't really hear Nezuko a lot, so it's like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to place that well.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm excited about. Another thing that I wanted to mention when we were talking about Cat Diaries earlier, which is Junji Ito's manga about his two cats, is he does like a Q&A in the middle of, I don't know if it was just the version that I bought or what, but like they did like an interview with him like at the end, and they just ask him the most like mundane questions, and he's just like this pure sweet little angel baby. And like we find out that he used to be like a dental hygienist before he started doing manga. And he was like in his little town, they have like, I don't want to call it an HOA, but it's like something equivalent, but like he was his like neighborhood accountant, and he's like, I'm not even good at math. I'm not good at this, but yeah, I do it, you know, whatever. But he's just like so precious. And I always see this meme and I'm like, yes, it's so true, because I see posts where Viz or Crunchy have Junji on and they're doing interviews and stuff, or like just people post about like meeting him in person. And it's the meme where it's like the artist and the art, and it's got a picture of the artist and it's got a picture of the art, and it's always like this like gloom and doom artist with this like Lisa Frank style artwork, and then you've got like this rainbow butterfly like artist, and then it's got like spooky skulls and skeletons as the art itself. And the comparison I see constantly in kind of, you know, the otaku world is Hayao Miyazaki and the Ghiblis, and then Junji Ito and then his artwork, where it's like Hayao Miyazaki is just like, what's the point in living? But like his artworks are beautiful and stunning and colorful and like very aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And then you have Junji Ito, who's like, he's wearing like cat ears and he's going, yeah, like in, you know, interviews. And he himself is like, oh, I can't watch that. That's scary. And like, but then like you see his artwork and you're like, sir, you drew that.
Yeah,
he's like, no, I'll get nightmares. I can't.
My husband and I were talking about that the other day because I was like so excited to watch this.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that meme where Hayao Miyazaki is basically like smoking a cigarette outside, and he's like, there's no point in anything. And then it's, you know, it's a gorgeous Ghibli field next to him, and then it's Junji Ito being like a precious little bean, and then it's somebody like being decapitated or something next to him. And I was like, you know, if you push them both together, you can get a whole human being, but they're going to be a really weird human being.
Well, you said earlier, and it wasn't when we were recording, so I want to bring it up again, but you said Junji Ito is in his 60s?
Yeah, he's 61. I was watching Viz on TikTok earlier, and they were doing an interview with him, and they put up a meme where it was like really crappily drawn picture that was supposed to be him. And he was like, is that supposed to be me? They look too young. I'm in my 60s. And I was like, oh, he's got to be, you know, I know he's a silly guy. He's probably pulling my leg. So before we started recording, I like pulled up his Wikipedia page because I was like, ain't no way. Ain't no way. This man was born in 1963. He is 61 years old.
No.
Yeah, I was like, there is no way. He does not look 61 years old. And I didn't know, like, I mean, I know he's had a long career. I didn't realize Uzumaki was written in, I think it was 98?
1998 to 1999. They were, I know, so Tomie, very similarly, Tomie was in 1996, so Uzumaki wasn't his first. But I know Tomie was posted... It's another one that's like a bunch of short stories that culminate to like a larger one, but they were posted in like a Halloween magazine back in 1996. And I think Uzumaki was something similar. So they started posting in August of 1998. And then there was 3 volumes. Then they were all re-released again in 2000 before the omnibus was released in 2010. And then, it was in pulp, and then, Viz Media took over, and then they re-released it a bunch. And, yeah, so it's old, but it still holds so well. And like when you go to read the manga, the art doesn't feel like it's from the 90s or early 2000s.
No, it doesn't. I feel like he has a very timeless style. Like,
he does.
It's very, like, you look at a piece of his work and you know it's him. But it's also, I mean, just looking at the picture that we had during the live, where it was just the two of them sitting next to each other talking, like, they don't look dated in any way. I can't say that that's like, oh, that's definitely a girl from like 1999, looking at them. That could be happening right now.
Right. Yeah, because if you look back at like the old Clamps and you look at like even around High School Host Club, you're like, yeah, that shit's old. But if you crack open any of Junji Ito's work, you couldn't place them in chronological order.
No, and he, like you said, with, for example, Oran, they have that very specific style of that time period with like the eyes and the way that the mouth is and everything. Junji Ito just said, this is my style, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to do that forever. And you can't pin anything down. You can't say this man wrote this whenever. It just, it's his work, and it looks so beautiful.
I second guessed myself the other day because I was like, wait, when did Tomie come out? And I cracked open my omnibus and I was looking and I was like, 2016. Okay, that's, it's older, or maybe it's 2006. I was like, it's older, but, like still fairly recent. And then I was like, that doesn't seem right. That number just doesn't seem correct. And then I checked it again, and the 2016 or 2006 date was when my omnibus, like when they started printing those, but in reality it was 1996. And I was like, holy crap, like I knew it was older. I didn't realize it was that old, but it's just because it holds so true. Like, especially with Tomie, like there's more people interactions in it than with Uzumaki, because Uzumaki, like the art is around like the whole spiral, where Tomie's whole bit is around like supernatural, like human interaction versus like the spiral piece of it. And so the fact that like, again, like the style is consistent, they don't have the super pointy chins, and they don't have like the really long fingers and the boxy foreheads. Like, look, I'm wearing my Tomie shirt. Like, she just, like, tell me what year this is from. You can't.
Yeah, that just looks like, I mean, it, like you said, that could have been from 2006. That could have been from 2016. I would have taken your word for it.
I gaslit myself into believing it. Yes, so, but yeah, no, I love that man. If anything ever comes out to say that he is impure, I don't know what I'll do, because he's like, I don't know, like even so back to the interview that I was telling you about from his like Cat Diaries, and I know we're way off tangent, but like I feel like I could talk about this man for hours. He, in his interview, because he talks about how like originally his like sisters and his mom were doing his like panel filling for him, so like he would draw it and they would do the black work for him. And then when he got married, his mom was like, well, it's your wife's job now, right? And so then she took over, and his sisters would help sometimes. But like, actually his sisters are the ones that got him into horror in the first place. But they help him, and they were helping him back in the 90s and stuff. But he wrote this Cat Diaries, and so it's like true stories of like him and his wife with their 2 cats, but they're creepified.
Yeah.
And so like he draws himself creepily, but like it's his own interpretation of himself, but then he draws his wife creepily. And so they like ask him in the interview, like, well, what does your wife think about like your interpretation of her? And he's like, oh, she doesn't really like what I did with her eyes, and she also like really didn't like the haircut that I gave her either. Like, but he's just like, yeah, like, I don't know, it's, whatever. But he's just so like, he wasn't playing it up. Like, he was just like, yeah, I gave her a bowl haircut and she didn't like that.
Oh no, I mean, who would?
No, right, but it was but he's just like so autistic coded, and I think that's what I love.
Yeah, I love the interviews and stuff that I've seen of him, and he's being shown pictures. I can't remember exactly what the interview was, but he's looking at something, and then all of a sudden he jumps. And he's like, "Oh, that scared me," and I'm like, "That scared you?
No,
You
that's what, like,
scare me. Like your brain scares me.
We
You
talked
seem
about
like
that
a lovely
earlier,
gentleman."
where he's just like, "Oh no, like that's too scary for me. I
Yeah.
can't do that. No, it's too spooky." It's almost like I'm maybe it was an interview where he was like watching his own work animated. He's like, I don't know, it's kind of scary.
I can't handle this right now. I'm not in a good headspace.
I know. I was actually talking to a coworker, and I had offhandedly, I was so excited about this, and so I had offhandedly, because me and this coworker, we talk about like anime or manga, like casually. He's watching JoJo's right now because I was like, no, please give it a second chance. And he's finally at the point where he's like, I'm enjoying this. And I'm like, sweet, dope, love that. And then I was telling him how excited I was about this. And I was like, hey, like, I don't know if you're into horror, but like, this is going to be so good. Like, even before I watched it, I was like, this is going to be dope. And so then he came into work today, and he immediately came to my desk and he's like, that shit was so creepy. He's like, I didn't even know like what to like think or feel after I watched it. He's like, I'm probably going to watch the rest of it. He's like, but it wasn't, I don't know what I was expecting. It wasn't that, but it was good. And I was like, yeah. He's like, I'll probably have my wife watch it because she's into horror. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. And so then I was like telling him all about Junji Ito and the whole bit and everything. And so I'm just trying to like get him, like I said, it's like that tasty little morsel where like folks who haven't been introduced to him like finally get introduced to Junji work, and they're like, holy crap, whereas it's been my whole life. And I'm like, around, it's literally been here the whole time.
And that's also a good segue to get somebody into anime and manga in general. Like, oh, your wife's into horror? Well, here's a whole subgenre of anime that you guys could watch. There's so much stuff out there.
I'm so excited for the series that I've self-declared that I'm doing, which is the Halloween series, where every day I'm going to post something like either creepy or spooky or like psychological. That's how I'm kind of like teeing it up to be like a broader range of things. And yeah, I'm going to talk about Junji at least half of the time, but the other stuff I'm going to throw out some like wild cards into like there's more than just like JJK and like Sailor Moon.
Yeah,
absolutely watch those. However, there is like a whole other like subclass genre that exists that doesn't get like enough attention, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where to your point, you're like, oh, like I've got a partner who's into like horror or whatever. Cool. And that's great, because now like they can also get into anime. But also what's cool about like Junji's work coming up again, even though like we said 1998 is when this was originally written, it's 2024, it's now relevant again. It's going to reintroduce people to like older stuff, and they're gonna research, and they're gonna go, holy crap, this is from 1996. What else does 1996 have? What other gems is the past keeping, like, you know? So it's gonna hopefully revitalize some of the older classic stuff too.
Yeah, I did see in our book club chat, one of our friends, they host an anime club at their school, and they're into, you know, JJK and things like that. But they were also saying like these kids want to go retro. Like retro anime apparently is in right now with the youth. And they're watching older stuff, which is so cool because there's so many things like it. I mean, the genre is so huge at this point. There's so many gems in the past that if you can get over the art style being different than what you're used to, because I feel like that's the biggest hindrance with a lot of people. Like, think about the old version of Fruits Basket, for example, how that looked and how jarring that was.
Talk about spooky.
Yeah, talk about spooky. Toru Honda's eyeballs were her whole face. But, you know, if you can get past some of the art, there's some really good stories out there.
Yeah. Also, I was talking, I mean, that's what we said earlier, where it's like, yeah, the 90s have like their shtick, but Junji is not subject to those, like, those rules, that criteria. Another one that I told,
his own business.
He does. He like runs the horror game.
Yes.
Some other things that Junji, like, he's done some just artwork for like some other, it's not even I don't even think it's a mangaka because it was like a pseudo like short story novel book, and he did a couple illustrations for that that were really good. He also did, I think it's more recent, but Dissolving Classroom. It's like a singular short story. That
I think
one
I've heard of that.
That one's also really good. It's a quick read. I doubt my coworker was going to read it, so I was like, hey, let me give you a synopsis. And it's hard to explain any of Junji's work without spoiling things, but you read it to experience the work. You don't read it necessarily for the plot anyway, right?
Yeah.
So then you go to explain it, and you're like, okay, so there's this kid, and when he apologizes to you too much, you eventually melt. And then, but it's because he's made a deal with the devil. But then his sister also is like slightly cannibalistic. So when people's brains start to melt, like she eats them. And like and they jump from school to school and like neighborhood to neighborhood. And then whenever his sister goes and like eats someone's brain, he goes and apologizes to, the people around them on behalf of his sister. But in reality, he's doing it to melt their brains because he has to pay this debt or whatever to this devil guy that he's got this deal with. And then like he eventually goes on public television and he's like apologizing to the nation, and like he's just like,
oh my gosh,
it's so good. And I'm like, man, how does he come up with this stuff? Like he's phenomenal.
I feel like he's good at taking a common, I don't want to say phobia, like a common thing, like just a common like
ordinary, like an ordinary thing, and like spookifying it, like really like, creeping it up.
That kid's obviously like milking apologizing. Like if you think of it in a realistic sense, he's utilizing his ability to like play with words and twist things, and kind of like, it sounds like he's kind of gaslighting to an extent.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing. That's something you see happen in your day-to-day life, and Junji Ito like twisted it. And the same thing with Uzumaki, like, oh, I want to get out of my small town. Like, there's got to be something wrong with my town. Why do people want to stay here? And he takes that and he twists it.
Well, so I was reading too, when you get to later, there's like some scenes where there are row houses where a bunch of people live. And a lot of times like the row houses are like lower income, and the people who live there forever, and those sorts of things. But he talks about like how this was inspired partially by him living in row houses as a child. And to your point, like he takes these mundane, these common entities, and then he builds these like this creepy horror like thing around it. And it's like, yeah, you're stuck in this row house, but why are you stuck in these row houses? Why can't you leave? Well, it's a curse on the town. Well, what's the curse on the town? What's pulling you in? What's keeping you in the town? Well, physically, what could keep you in is like a gravitational pull or like a tornado. And it's like, okay, well, what could be representative of that? Like, oh, just the spiral symbol. And like, you can see it built up from that. Like, it's not like you can see where maybe the story built up in his brain, where it's not just like, oh, he's like, that's a shape that I'm going to make creepy.
Yeah.
So it's like he lets his own mind free, and then like he kind of twists the story around it.
Yeah, and that's what I liked about the first episode of Uzumaki too, was I was like, all right, I know this is about spirals. Where are they at? Where are they at? And it was, I mean, it wasn't subtle by any means, because in the first episode when the main character girl is walking and she's like, hey, I'm going to tell you a story about my hometown and all these crazy batshit stories that happened while I was there. And she's walking through like the edge of town, and there's the grass that's spiraling. You look up in the sky and the clouds are kind of spiraling, but it's like, okay, they're spirals. They're not doing anything scary, but they're there.
They're not sinister,
yeah,
are they?
But they're there. And then that made me like want to look in the background more, because they gave you these first ones kind of blatantly. Yeah. And I'm like, where else are they? Where are they? They're everywhere. It's literally in the wind. Like when the wind comes blowing through when she meets her boyfriend on the bus on the train after he gets back into town, the wind starts spiraling, and the water next to them in the creek is spiraling.
And then there's a tornado, and then like it's everywhere. I was pretty, so like when I remember first reading the manga and being like, I don't know, like, is there really a spiral curse? Like, or is it just the dad being weird?
Yeah.
Right? But then it got to the scene with like them cremating his dad, and then the spiral going into the sky, and then his dad's face coming out of the sky, and then the pond sucking his ashes out of the sky and into the water there. And I'm just kind of like, they didn't play on that enough, but like that should have been more ominous. Like that's like a water source for the town and like the animals and stuff in the town, where like I wish they would have like loomed on that a bit longer, maybe shown like, I mean, it's going to come back up, right?
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like that the build-ups, like the details are there, the build-up's not there, and again, but that just plays, it's not necessary now, because again, it's gonna come back, but like that's where the extra bit of creep comes in the manga.
And that also plays into, again, like we were saying, you know, these mundane, ordinary things where, oh, you joke, like, is there something in the water? Why are people in this town so crazy? There's literally something in their water now.
Yeah, right, exactly. So
that's I'm excited to pick up on more of those like normal occurrences and minute things like that as I continue to watch.
Yay. Okay, so you put in a request at the library to read it.
Yeah, it wasn't at my library on Hoopla, so I'm gonna check and see if they have any physical versions of it.
Okay.
And if they don't, then I'll just go somewhere and buy it.
Yeah.
Preferably the omnibus, because I would like the whole chunk in one go.
They're so pretty. They're so worth owning. I mean, you can read at the library, so we're a library, obviously. We're a team library here. But they're worth owning. Like, these are books where, like, I hype them up so much, too, that, like, I reread them, I lend them out to people, because I'm like, you need this media, take this. Like,
yeah.
Well,
that's
so
my
good.
thing. Like, if that's what I've been trying to do, I'm gonna get it in a free capacity. May it be like through Libby or Hoopla or physically from the library, and then if I enjoy it enough, then I'll go buy it.
I like
but
that.
this already sounds like something that I'm gonna enjoy. I want this on my bookshelf so I can point to it and be like, look, right there, that you should go read that.
I don't have mine with me today because it is literally lent out as we speak to one of my friends. Because that's just, I'm like, yes, please, you need this media.
Yeah.
So you'll probably watch the second episode before you're able to like get through the printed media.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get back together and we'll come and talk through like the full series, like all 4 episodes once it's done. And then we can kind of talk through more of those comparisons to see like how you feel now versus how you feel after like reading it fully versus what you saw in the anime. And we'll have Doki on for that one too, because I know she's also watching it and she's also read it.
Yeah, I think I want to try to watch the whole series first and then read it. Just like, I don't want to be spoiled at all. I don't want to accidentally catch something.
You want to like experience the anime live, so to speak.
Yeah, and then I mean, I'm probably going to speed read through the manga because I've already enjoyed just this first episode alone. I've enjoyed so much. I know I'm going to enjoy. Yeah, I'm just gonna eat that shit up. Yeah, I'm going to tear that up.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Okay. So I'm excited then to see. So versus like myself and Doki who have read it and then watched it versus you who will have watched it and then read it. That'll be an interesting perspective to have. I'm really excited for that too. Yeah, I like
doing that. I mean, where we have the comparisons where you've read something versus I've only watched it. I just think it's a interesting correlation.
Oh yeah, like when we had Danny like Phantom on and he was like talking about the live action and then like you're talking about the anime, but then I've also seen the manga and it just like it just adds depth to the media as a whole.
Oh, speaking of that, my husband was watching TikTok the other day and like the English dub of Cherry Magic came up and he was like, "You saw this, right?" And I had only seen the sub. And I was like, what do you mean I've seen this? Like, I just didn't recognize the voices and what they were saying until, like, it was like a preview in English of it. And then, like, it registered. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so weird for me for a second. Like, I've seen this. I've read the words. Like, I don't speak Japanese, but, like, I experienced this. And just hearing it in a different language threw me off that much.
Yeah, it's so sometimes it's jarring to go from like, well, because like you hear them speaking, but you're like, I know for me, I'm mostly focused on like what I'm reading
Yeah.
to like even hear the voice. So then like when you have the voice
Exactly.
paired with it, you're like, oh, there's sound.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Right.
Excuse me.
Okay. Any final thoughts on Uzumaki?
I love it. I like that it looks like manga come to life. Very creepy. I can't wait to be spooked out more. I hope there's more things. I told you previously there's a very short list of things that will make me like crawl under the covers or hide behind my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait for more of that. I like being scared, and it is a rare day when I'm actually scared. So that one scene, I was like hungry. I was like, I need more. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and I can't wait to read it too.
Yeah, so my husband hasn't read it either, but he's waiting for all of the episodes to come out before he watches any of them, because I think he's worried about what you're experiencing, which is the I need it now hunger. And so he's gonna like wait for them all to come and watch all four, and then I will be rewatching it because hopefully by then it's in English too. So then I will have watched it in Japanese. I'll get to experience it in English, and then be like next to him while he's watching it to be like, ooh, in the manga this, or like, oh, you should know that detail, and I'll be like really annoying, but it's because I'm really excited because I think they did such a good job with this. I think it's interesting that it's an Adult Swim thing. We didn't plug earlier in, but you had mentioned that you can actually watch it for free on Adult Swim with commercials. It's available on YouTube TV. You can also watch it live on Adult Swim if you have cable. But it's very accessible for folks, which again is another rarity thing. So I'm excited for the studio to have done. I think they did a really good job. I love how things alternate between being still and being like in motion, because like the background sometimes still, the front facing stuff is in motion. So a lot of very specific artistic direction happened, but they stayed so true to the manga, and they still did such a quality job. I have no notes for what they've done so far.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I did want to point out, and this was so stupid, when I was rewatching it, there it is. I needed to play the clip again really quick so I could find it. It says color director, and they had like the color director person's name listed, and I was like, it's in black and white. How many? This man had the easiest job. He came in and said, "That looks just like the manga. Good job, team." And he left for the day. And he's like
holding up. He's like holding up a manga, and he's getting like this very specific hue of white, and he's color matching the paper of like the original printings of it or something like.
This schoolboy's jacket is not gray enough. I need you guys to make this a little bit more gray.
Yeah, it's more gray, less gray, darker gray, white, maybe a slightly yellow tint to the white. No, too yellow. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, that looks a little too cream to me. Can you go back and make it white? I'm talking snow.
Spooky. Give it spooky, but make it. So yeah, that's. I didn't even notice that. I
didn't notice it the first time I was watching it, and then when I was sitting here like letting it play, I was like, what?
I forgot to tell you the most important detail. The next time you watch it, and I didn't do this the first time I watched it, watch the ending with headphones on.
Oh, I did notice when they were the scene when he's walking her to school or walking her home from getting off the train. Yeah. When the wind's blowing, I had my headphones on and I could hear like, you know, it was different than when I was watching it on the TV. It sounded like I was outside and the wind was like blowing past me compared to watching it, like, you know, just in my room on my TV.
So the score and the like exit like audio, the music that's playing at the end, like when the credits are going, it's set to alternate between your ears to create a spinning sensation while you're listening to it.
Oh my gosh, no way. I have to
So check that out, and we'll talk about that too, because I just watched it on my TV and then I read about it afterwards, and I was like, that's what I mean, like the amount of detail that went into this, it's sickening, and they did such a dope job, and I'm just so excited to share this with like literally every person that I meet. I'm like, hi, I don't know you, but have you watched Uzumaki? And then my like grocer at the grocery store is like, ma'am, is that paper or plastic? So
do you want to join my cult?
That's what it feels like, yeah. So, this is Girls Gaze Anime. Thanks for joining our Junji Ito cult today. We'll catch you next time for more Junji Ito fun facts and Uzumaki shenanigans.
Thanks for joining us for Halloween, friends.
Happy Halloween!
Whee!